Hello, I am Mizo. I am today putting forward to you a way by which water and air can result in life. Literally, you have life coming from water and air. But for this, we go back about 6 billion years back. The earth started off as a molten ball, nearly a sphere, flattening at the top, that both the poles is flattened just a bit and bulging at the equators. But as the earth cools down, there is at the surface things begin to solidify at around about 800 degrees centigrade. As it cools down further, the crust becomes thicker and thicker. But then the first features appear, because at this point the earth is absolutely flat. This is a flat earth. The features are deep crevices, because there is a shrinking involved, and the shrinking involved creates these cracks and crevices going maybe a mile deep or even further. Now the temperature keeps on falling and the crust becomes thicker and thicker. The hot molten lava goes deeper and deeper into the earth. The surface temperatures drop. Now when it drops to about 120 degrees at the north and south poles, see, today we can see that there is a difference between both the temperature at the pole and the equator is about 40 degrees centigrade. If we take that as our way of thinking, then what happens is that when the temperature drops to 120 at the poles, the temperature at the equator is 160. So at 120, water can exist as superheated water, and you remember the atmosphere, the mass of the atmosphere is about 10,000 times the mass today, and the pressure is also tremendous. It's not one atmosphere, it's about 5,000, even 10,000 atmospheres. Tremendous. There's a huge amount of pressure also involved. But leave that aside. You see, when the first rains begin to fall, they fall at the North Pole, and the surface of the earth is smooth. So the water flows from the North Pole all the way down, and when it begins to evaporate, it comes back again, and there's a circulation set up, starting somewhere maybe at the tropics or even the temperate zone, and spreading further to equator. Finally, when the temperature falls low enough, there is a circulation from the equator to the North Pole, and North Pole the water flows back. The velocities are very, very high. Now at these very high velocities, what happens is the earth, the air and the atmosphere, the water vapor and the water droplets, they move at very high speed, and they pick up a lot of electric charge. This electric charge is discharged in the form of silent electrical discharges and lightning. So you have this huge amount of lightning all over the globe, flashing all the time, and experiments have shown that under these conditions, see, we have a very primitive atmosphere. There is no oxygen out there. Like if you see today, it's not about the water vapor, it's about the oxygen too. The oxygen we see today is not the oxygen of the primitive atmosphere. The oxygen we see today is absolutely a product of life. It is a pollutant. But leaving that aside, there is hardly any oxygen. When the first rains falls, they take in all the sulfur dioxide and the poisonous gases, and these go into very dilute form with the water, and the water is actually sweet, because this the saltness of water comes from dissolving the salts from the continents and flowing back to the sea, and this system has not yet occurred. So the water is basically sweet, maybe even distilled water. Now when these lightning flashes are occurring all over the place, it converts a part of the nitrogen or the nitrogen into, because the atmosphere is basically nitrogen and methane and carbon dioxide, and under such circumstances that has been created, they form amino acids, and the amino acids they dissolve with the water and they flow onto, they fall onto the earth. And the earth has a very thin spread all over the earth. There is no lake or there is no ocean at this point. So the water is the earth has got a whole covering of water, thicker at the North Pole, thinner at the equator, and there is a continuous flow. It's a very peculiar state of affairs. But the water contains a lot of amino acids, although in a very dilute form. But the temperatures begin to fall further and further and further, and I pick up a temperature of 38 degrees centigrade. There is a reason behind it, and at this temperature, when the surface of the earth is cooling down to about 38 degrees centigrade, it takes a long time. And in geography, know that in this time period, various continents can come up, and hills and even mountains can come up in this time period. So there is a movement of the earth crust that creates these things. Now it's quite possible for a large body of water to be trapped, cut off from its from the outside water, and you have first seas and oceans forming. But this large body of water that is cut off from the main water sources, if it dries up, then what happens is the amino acids become more concentrated. A point is reached, and remember I said that this is maintained at 40 degrees centigrade by the heat coming from inside the earth, not by the sun itself. All the sun is quite capable of maintaining these temperatures. So these amino acids concentrate, and when it concentrates, they polymerize. That is, amino acids stick to each other and they form long chains. These amino acids sticking together, forming long chains, can be even just 2 amino acids, or maybe 1,000 or 10,000 even amino acids, and they are absolute random chains. I mean, every single molecule is an individual, and all of them are different from each other. It is like a fingerprint. So we have this huge lake or a sea, inland lake or a sea, which is cut off from its other water sources, in which there are trillion of these molecules, and they are constantly breaking and putting together, but they cannot reproduce. They are just individual molecules, and individuals, they don't survive to the next generation. You can be a rugged individual, but you don't survive even one generation. And this is what happens to these molecules. However, we are digressing from the story. Now we have these very long molecules which cannot reproduce. However, there are trillions of them, and some of them, or maybe one of them, can reproduce a very small part. Like if I take this molecule that big, maybe that big of it is able to reproduce itself. It's a matter of random chance, but because there are so many molecules happening and dissolving at the same time, the chance gets leveled out. So out of this very long molecule, you have a small part of it that is active and is able to reproduce itself. Now this small part gets reproduced, and around it attracts other amino acids to form random chains. One part is not random, the rest of it is random, and this process keeps on repeating itself. And there are 2 mechanisms for this to happen, but I'm not going into it right now. Now you have these molecules that at one part they have an active part, and the rest of it is basically random. It could be consisting of 50, 100 or even 1,000 amino acids in a particular sequence now, and over a period of time they tend to take over the system and predominate. There are individuals who have this structure which cannot reproduce, but these molecules over a period of time will tend to dominate the system. Now, at the edges, like you have this active site, and at the edges there are random structures. Now over a period of time, the random structures also, because they are all sort of permutations and combinations, some of it will become active. So the active part over a period of time increases and becomes longer and longer and longer. Maybe at 10,000 it is now able to transmit, not only the structure, is able to transmit some information from the daughter, from this mother molecule to the daughter molecule, and this sets up the basis for life. Now these molecules that have long active part which is able to reproduce constantly, they are also subject to hydrolysis. Now over a period of time, some of these molecules will get the ability to protect itself from the hydrolysis. They can do it by a number of ways. It can attract other molecules to protect the chain, or maybe coil itself and coil itself. All sorts of things can happen, but I'm not saying that this is DNA as we know it today. I'm just saying it, these are active molecules which are able to protect itself now from hydrolysis. Now once this happens, at the edges of the lake where it dries up, you have the small flakes of these molecules, and these can be pushed by wind, storms, or even other rivers to other sites where they are able to reproduce again. So these molecules over a period of time dominate the globe. They go all over the globe and they dominate it because they can protect themselves from hydrolysis. They can also go into the main seas and start reproducing there. But at this point, something interesting happens. See, within that active site, a small part of it is able to produce the first enzymes, and these enzymes are basically molecules that have the ability to break up the other molecules. And this is the way life works. It might sound very bad, but life works this way. So these enzymes are the first digestive enzymes, and they go into the environment and they attack the other molecules. The individual molecules that could not duplicate itself and could not reproduce, or even the first generation active molecules which are still there, they get hydrolyzed and broke up into, even presence of low, even in concentrated solution, they get hydrolyzed and they break up into various amino acid form, and this molecule which is protected can scavenge on them and reproduce itself all over the place. So basically what happens, they predominate the biosphere now. So now we have an active molecule that is actually very long. It is transmitting information from mother to daughter. At the same time, it is able to protect itself, reproduces, protect itself, and digest to a small amount other molecules. Basically, it takes its takes its energy from the soil and the sun, and is able to also invade nearby sources of water, eventually go into the main seas. And this is nothing but life. It is now life now. It is not a collection of amino acids anymore. And these are the first forms of life. I don't think there are fossils of this, because they got to evolve further into cells, and that is now seen in fossils. So probably this whole system was finished by 5 billion years or 4.5 billion years, whatever. And it is quite possible to have life from air, water, and energy coming from the sun or from the earth. I finished my lecture at this point. Thanks for listening in.